Hello and welcome to a very fun, special, exciting Olympic gold medal winning edition of the CHGO Red Stars podcast presented by Coors Light, the official domestic beer partner of Chicago Fire FC. Chicago, choose chill. Go to CoorsLight.com/CHGO soccer to get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. I'm your host, Alex Campbell, and I am joined by a very special co-host, fitting of the momentous occasion that is this episode, a former host of this show and of Southside Trap before it, a longtime Casey Kruger and Alyssa Naeher appreciator, a musician you could see at cool little venues around Chicago, and the host of the Late Sub podcast, as well as a writer of words over at Just Women's Sports, Claire Watkins. Welcome back to the show. Thrilled to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Big one, right? Big one to talk through. Lots of stuff happening in the last couple of weeks.
It has been a lot. The United States women are Olympic gold medalists for the first time in 12 years. It was kind of jarring that it's been that long. I would have sworn Alyssa Naeher had a gold medal before, but it turns out she had not. If you're listening to this show, I'm assuming you're aware that the U.S. women's national team beat Brazil 1-0 in that Olympic gold medal match on Saturday. Emma Hayes' first tournament in charge. And of course, from a Chicago perspective, Claire, the important notes here: Alyssa Naeher is an Olympic gold medalist. Mallory Swanson is an Olympic gold medalist. Casey Kruger, Tierna Davidson, Corbin Albert, other people who do not have Chicago ties also won gold medals. Mallory Swanson scores the only goal of the game in the 57th minute, ends up leading the team in goals with 4. Alyssa Naeher made a couple huge saves. She kept a clean sheet for the entire knockout stage, which is ridiculous. Claire, as you're reflecting on this game from Saturday, what's sticking with you about what we saw as the U.S. went out and won gold?
Yeah, I mean, I think the really positive overall thing for the U.S., especially kind of moving forward with this win behind them, is they had to win a lot of different types of games to make it through. Like, I think even everyone who watched the gold medal game were like, in the first half, were maybe a little bit like, oh no, this is new. This is not the kind of game that they've had to play in this tournament so far. But saw the team break down a low block, saw the team do a nice job with mid blocks or playing teams straight up, saw them get into kind of a track meet against Brazil and come out on top. So I think not only is it that they won and they like never trailed and never dropped a result and all of those really positive things, but I think their flexibility and ability to kind of like dig deep and play their own game despite facing a lot of different tactical styles is really impressive and very refreshing, frankly, after the Andonovski era of the team.
Yeah, especially when, depending on how you measure it, Emma Hayes had been in charge for 2 or 6 games, depending on if you count Emma Hayes' shadow management via Twyla Kilgore as Emma Hayes games or not. Also worth mentioning, this was Marta's final game for Brazil on the international level. You know, an absolute legend and a trailblazer in a way that I think is easily forgotten given how much women's soccer has changed since Marta started playing it professionally such a long time ago at this point. But yeah, to your point, this game was totally different. The U.S. didn't have much of the ball. They frankly just survived the opening half hour of this game. And once they had done that, you could tell once Brazil's legs were as equally tired as the U.S.'s were, it felt like the U.S. were eventually going to get that goal, and they did. But let's start with, from a Chicago perspective, and maybe from a U.S. women's national team perspective, the headliners. Mal Swanson going from a torn patella tendon to the gold medal winning goal scorer in the space of 16 months. It's hard to overstate how well she played in this tournament, how well she's played this season in Chicago. But as impressive as we know she is, Claire, I don't think anyone would have anticipated that the comeback would have been this quick, would have been this strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's one of the greatest comeback stories of the team this year, possibly in recent U.S. women's national team history. I mean, I keep saying this on my show. Yes, you maybe expect a player of her age to be able to return, but you never know if her, for lack of a better term, like giddy up is going to be the same. It doesn't really seem like she's lost her pace. But even past that, is the touch on the ball the same? Is like that confidence finishing the same? And it seems like, credit genuinely to Lauren Donaldson and the Red Stars, they did not push her to do too much too early this season, even let her get her touch back, really eased her into playing full 90 minutes. And I think that set her up well. And then also a credit to Swanson. She seemed to come back from this injury where she was doing a lot of like non-contact, a lot of touch, like 1-2 touch work, better on the ball than ever. She's developed like a left leg that she didn't really even have pre-injury. So whatever her process was to return, not only focused, I think, on the fitness element, but also the soccer part. And then with the support of the club kind of easing her in. Yeah, it's crazy the way she was able to perform this summer.
Yeah, you mentioned the left-footed thing. I mean, she was never like a totally like, a laughably one-footed player, but some of the goals she scored on her left foot this season, it's been remarkable. And yeah, obviously, Lorne Donaldson knows her well from his time coaching her when she was a kid. So I think you're right to give him and the Red Stars coaching staff credit, but it's been really also interesting to hear Mal Swanson talk about it. I mean, I think she referred to that, the infection, referring specifically to the infection she had in her leg as a thing that changed her life. When she shared that story, it was months after the fact that she shared that story with, I believe, Sam Mewis on Sam Mewis's podcast about how scary that was. And it's been, for a player who has never been like the most talkative, it's been really interesting to kind of hear her talk about that process and the the amount she's grown up as a player and was kind of forced to in that process as a person as well. Yeah, 7 goals, 3 assists this season for Chicago. She's been really outstanding. She gets that goal, that moment. I think that photo of her just screaming for joy as she peels away.
Well, I'd say underrated for Mal as well is, that 2023 World Cup last year before the injury was supposed to be the comeback. Like, I think people kind of forget. They remember the form that she was in maybe from like end of 2021 to the beginning of 2023, but she was
Mhm.
completely left off coach's choice, left off the Tokyo roster. And I don't think actually anybody like questioned that in a huge way, but I remember that time in 2021, I remember, hearing that like she found out about that publicly. She didn't get a phone call from US Soccer about that. Like the comeback was on many years ago. And so again, it's really cool to see not only this player like come back from the injury last year, but come back from, this was her first tournament roster that she made since being left off by coach's choice for Tokyo. So I think that that's significant as well. I think people talk a lot about how young she was in 2016 up to now, but I just think that that is also just incredibly impressive, where this is not only a year's worth of work, but just like pretty much 4 years worth of work.
Yeah, it's easy to forget kind of that she went through a very almost stereotypical like prodigy struggle
Mhm.
after that 2016 Olympic Games. She goes to UCLA and then she doesn't. She's on the Loudon era Spirit teams that were
Mhm.
kind of a bit of a mess, and the form doesn't really come together as it ends up being people she's on that team with, like Rose Lavelle, who end up becoming kind of the stars there. And so yeah, it's been such a long journey all the way back for her, and now she's pretty much undeniably one of the best attackers in the world of women's soccer right now. Of course, also on a Chicago note, we got to talk about Alyssa Naeher, who, not exactly a comeback, but if we go back, I would say only about 6 months ago, there were serious questions being asked, and I think rightfully, about Alyssa's place in this team. Not only just as the number one, but it was concerns that where is she at? Is she still in a position to contribute to this team? And then the penalty heroics at the Gold Cup happen. She's now had this tournament, and this is Alyssa's job as long as she wants it. As I mentioned, 3 clean sheets in the knockout stage. Just had a ridiculous tournament overall. And I think the combination of seeing the role she's had as very much the elder statesman on the Red Stars, and then also being around all her young teammates at this tournament, it's just been a wonderful year to be an Alyssa Naeher fan.
Yeah, I mean, she, even if you look at her league play this year from last year to this year, it's improved significantly. I've always been a big advocate for Nair. Is like, she's such a smart goalkeeper, she's such a smart player, but if she's playing behind a defense where the lines aren't right and the angles aren't accurate, she has trouble making up for that. The one thing you don't want to do with Alyssa Nair at this point in her career is hang her out to dry. But behind a good defense, she is a world-class goalkeeper, and that's what we've seen actually at times, I think, with the Red Stars this year, when we've seen some of that nice defensive work from them, but also what we've seen from the US.
Yeah, I mean, it's night and day. I mean, there was lots of points made last year about her league play struggles, but that Red Stars defense last year was the worst in NWSL.
They
No
just were
one was
not
going to
getting
look good.
organized. It just did not seem like they were really getting a ton of help from the coaching staff either in terms of
Also
organization.
that.
I just think, yeah, it was just a bad situation. And I think that it wasn't surprising that she played better for the US last year. And then it's just not surprising that she's playing better for both teams this year.
Yeah, Sam Staub, Natalia Kuika, definitely helping quite a bit there on the Chicago front. Um, but I do want to stick for a minute on the personality we've seen grow. It became kind of a meme over time that Alyssa's not a big hugger, that she's not this big smiley person. And we've seen a lot of personality from Alyssa Naeher this year. Trinity Rodman, maybe most recently being the most responsible for kind of you know um pushing her on a bit and, joking with her. I think it's just been to see her really enjoying this experience. It just feels like as somebody who's been around a long time, Alyssa Naeher deserves all of this. And it's cool to feel like that fans have gotten a chance to know her a little bit more than maybe they did in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely seeing a player get more comfortable with sort of the larger aspects of being a known entity or a professional soccer player as she gets a little bit older in her career. She's also talked about, I mean, she's gone through the experiences that she went through, even just going through um, the Challenge Cup with the US, or not with the US, the Challenge Cup with the Red Stars in 2020, or all of the upheaval with the Red Stars in 2021, 2022, 2023. She talked about how those experiences really changed the way she was as a leader. It maybe softened her a little bit, or she feels like she grew a lot as a leader during that time. So it does feel like kind of in slow motion seeing a player kind of open up a little bit more, and you see her teammates really respond to that. But yeah, I don't know. I've always advocated for Naeher as like a quiet. She's a quiet softie. I mean, you don't get the
Hmm.
Uncle Naeher moniker back in like 2017 if you're not showing up at people's houses and like hanging their televisions, right? So it is nice to
Right.
see it just a little bit more publicly. I think what she's been doing behind the scenes for a long time, and I think actually because of how mindful she is, she even said in that article that Meg Linehan wrote immediately after I think it was the semifinal, or maybe it was the final, that she wants to find her place on this team. And she knows that her teammates are quite a bit younger, and she's maybe doesn't have that core group of friends that she grew up with on this team.
Right.
And so I just think that that's also just being smart about making those connections so that you play better on the field as well.
Yeah, it's something I mentioned with the Red Stars this year that there's only two players who's on the Red Stars roster, I believe now, whose age begins with a 3,
Hmm.
and one of them is Alyssa Naeher, and the other is Shea Groom, who just got there. So it's a very different team, and yeah, you talk about all the players who left. There was that mass exodus of that core of the Red Stars, and it was kind of everybody except Naeher, and she's kind of taken on a new role there. Yeah, you mentioned the uncle vibes. For example, what was it earlier this year at at, I believe, a Swanson Throne July party? It's Alyssa Naeher is the one manning the grill at a
Exactly.
party
Yep.
full of presumably also Major League Baseball players, and so that's just like an excellent vibe. Real quick here before we get to our first break. This isn't really even a question. Naomi Girma is the best women's soccer player in the world right now.
Certainly seems like it. Certainly seems like it. Yeah, talk about someone who's raised their level continuously. And I think the thing that Germa, it's been noted, but the fact that she was able to have this tournament with like different center back partners basically every single game, really, really impressive. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's chatter about like, oh man, who's going to be the first seven-figure women's soccer transfer? I mean, I would circle, highlight, underline her name, especially given that San Diego is, despite these very cool kits. If you're watching on YouTube, sporting this in honor of Naomi Girma today, Jimmy Butler around wearing one yesterday, apparently. Things there are a bit tumultuous to say the least. So, I mean, yeah, she's just such an impressive player. Her calmness on the ball. She's going to eventually be the captain of this team. It feels kind of inevitable, and it's just I don't know. It's just been really fun to watch her kind of come into her own and just become that player that probably a lot of people hoped she would be, and now she's just this absolutely dominant, globally recognized force.
And my final thought on Germa, and this is I keep saying this, I think it was really sunny in the first half of that Brazil game, and that's why she made mistakes. I think it was the sun.
I mean, Ludmila turned her absolutely inside out in a way that we haven't seen anybody do to Naomi Girma basically ever. So, yes, I like the sun as an excuse. We're going to talk more about how the U.S. women's national team won that gold medal right after this quick break. CHGO Red Stars is brought to you and presented by Coors Light. There are so many occasions in life where we need to choose to chill. Maybe it was after the excitement of watching that gold medal game because the U.S. women, maybe all their games, some of those games were absolutely exhausting. Really just needed to take a deep breath, take a step back after that. Whether you're out at a sporting event, a music festival, it's been beautiful weather in Chicago lately. There are so many opportunities to choose to chill. And when you choose chill, reach for an ice cold Coors Light. When the mountains on Coors Light turn blue, Coors Light is as cold as the Rockies. It is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smoother finish. When you embrace a chill mindset, it's a good time to choose chill and crack open a Coors Light. Coors Light is mountain cold refreshment, crisp and refreshing as the Colorado Rockies. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/CHGO-GOAL. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. CHGO Red Stars is also brought to you by Shady Rays. Get ready for the rest of your summer with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Their world-class product coming from an independent company has been rated 5 stars by over 300,000 customers. Their frames are durable. Their optics are crystal clear, just as good as those similar looking sunglasses you might have used before. And they've got hundreds of options to choose from. You're bound to find the perfect pair for what you're looking for, maybe in your team's favorite colors as well. Use your own experience. Excuse me, I'm reading off the script too bad there. My own experience using Shady Rays has been great lately. Getting their personal promise to replace any lost or broken shades. They really came through for me on a pair of shades I'd owned for 2 years. They broke. I got a new pair at a huge discount delivered to my door within a couple weeks and got some great sale offers, special offers for using that deal at the time as well. So if your shades ever go missing, take an unexpected hit, whatever happens, that lost or broken replacement guarantee is always there for you no matter how long you've owned your Shady Rays. If you don't love your shades, you can also exchange them for a new pair worry-free within 30 days. There is no risk when you shop. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and use code CHGO for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades, rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. So, Claire, we talked, of course, a lot about Mallory Swanson, but Mallory Swanson was not the only attacker for the U.S. who had quite a good tournament. Whatever you want to call them, whether it's a triple espresso as they named themselves, or maybe my personal favorite, what Telemundo went with, which was El Tridente de la Muerta, the Trident of Death. Swanson, Smith, Rodman, kind of feels like the U.S. has their attack for the foreseeable future and then some.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really exciting how well that worked. I mean, I think that's one where you have to point to Hayes, and these are the kinds of decisions that get sort of written into history as gut checks that work out well. And I think Hayes made the right call when she kind of cleared the way for those 3 going into the Olympics. I think that those were 3 players that were, I mean, again, like Smith is a good example where she was being played slightly out of position for a long time for the U.S. Move her centrally. She's a lot more effective. Swanson being back in the form that she's in obviously makes a huge impact from last year, and then the growth of Trinity Rodman, but they're also young, right? Like it blew my mind. Everyone was like, Sophia Smith's going to win Olympic gold on her birthday. And I'm like, yeah, her 24th birthday. Because she left Stanford so early, I'm still just like, yeah, she's got to be like 26 right now. She just turned 24. So they're all going to be under the age of 30 in 3 years for the next World Cup. And barring, anything that might happen in those years, I think that is at least going to be the basis upon which the attack is set for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned the growth of Trinity Rodman. I think, Swanson being this good, we knew she had the potential, but it's that she's been this good this fast and that she's able to come back from that injury. Sophia Smith, she's done it in the NWSL. She's going to score goals if you give her that volume of opportunities. But I think this is the best we've seen Trinity Rodman play in a U.S. shirt. I mean, there were concerns going into the tournament that she was picking up yellow cards too easily, that the final third product really wasn't there, but she was just excellent all around in this tournament, nutmegging players to boot. It really felt like we saw, in a way that I think we've seen it for the Washington Spirit, but not necessarily the national team. We saw it all come together for Rodman over the course of this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, people forget Vlatko Andonovski did not fast track Trinity Rodman. She was did not play a lot of DMPs on rosters when she got brought in. She was brought along very, very slowly on those Andonovski rosters. People remember that she started a fair amount of games in the World Cup, but that was only because Swanson got hurt. She was kind of thrown into that big, it was kind of, again, that takeaway from the Andonovski World Cup in the first place, which is a lot of players got thrown in kind of to the deep end immediately. So she had a muted World Cup last year, right? But it was her first major tournament starts, and she really was not primed for how much of a role that she had. And so I think just what we saw, like you said, is her using what she feels very comfortable doing for the Spirit into the United States system for the first time, which I think people noted, obviously, what she's able to do on the ball. Her passing is underrated. But I think also people noted just how comfortable she is dropping back into the midfield and playing defense as well. And that's even when she wasn't, hitting the back of the net, that's something that she's always hung her hat on. And that's always been something that if you are having any issues, maybe cracking a US roster, that's always going to set you apart because they need that commitment to full team defense to make the system work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's a cheat code. Her fitness, I mean, the way she was still looking pretty involved late in games, but also her ability to track back and then get back forward. She's kind of able, to your point, to play as a wing back out of possession. And then when the ball turns over, she's up and forward. And when it's going back the other way, she's getting back. And you really don't have to worry about either side. She's going to be able to get forward, and she's always going to have that commitment to track back. So, yeah, her work rate is phenomenal, especially for a player of her age. And yeah, you got to just imagine that as her career progresses, she's only going to get better probably on that final third stuff. And we already saw with that left-footed strike earlier in the tournament against Japan what she's capable of. And so, yeah, her potential just seems limitless right now.
Yeah, I think that versatility, I mean, we saw even with the way Hayes approached the shape of the team, very comfortable asking Swanson to drop back out of possession, very comfortable asking Rodman to drop back out of possession. I think that all of those are tenets of that versatility that you could see someone filling in different kinds of roles depending on what's asked of them on the international level. And yeah, honestly, I'm hopeful that Rodman comes back to the NWSL and scores some more goals. She was leaving some on the table before she left for Paris. So I would like to see maybe that finishing form, that comfort level, like you said, sort of that cutting inside on that tight angle beat a couple NWSL goalkeepers, because I think that if there was anything kind of actually missing from her club game more this season, you saw like Croy Bethune, right, notching up the goals and the assists. But I think I'd love to see Rodman be a little bit more clinical, bring that form back to the domestic game.
It is very funny to think that Croy Bethune could end up winning the NWSL MVP award after all of this. But I mean, she has been that good. She's a young midfielder, which that's a good transition to talk about the one area of this U.S. team that was not that good at this tournament. The attack was great. Naomi Girma and Alyssa Naeher were just insane. Meanwhile, Lindsay Horan really struggled this tournament. Sam Coffey and Rose Lavelle, when fit and available, were okay. Corbin Albert was pretty good relative to, I think, what people would have expected of her. She, of course, gets the assist on the Olympic winning goal. So the midfield feels like a bit of a question right now, and the only answer that seems to be an obvious thing to try is maybe Lily Johannes, but there's lots of questions here for Emma Hayes to sort out in the coming months and years.
Yeah, I think the positive thing, going back to Sam Coffey, who I actually think had a quite good tournament, but she is sort of a limited player, maybe physically, just in that she's not the paciest number 6 that the U.S. has ever had. I think that also one of the slight tweaks, I keep mentioning that 4-4-2 out of possession, is she really fixed the midfield spacing a lot. And so I think at least the nice thing about where the midfield is at with those, they didn't have time to make huge, broad stroke changes, is that I don't think we're going to have this, again, moving into that I keep going back to the Vlatko era, but asking one lone number 6 to just like cross the Atlantic Ocean on the field, just to like keep the ball away from the defense. But yeah, I think this is the big project for Hayes. And I think actually the really difficult thing is going to be, how do you improve this part of the pitch without losing what makes the team great now? Yes, they want to possess more. Yes, I think, like you said, Johannes, I'm very, very hopeful that she's open to the idea of becoming a core part of that group leading up to 2027. I think there are a number of I think people keep saying Ashley Sanchez has had a wonderful season so far in the NWSL. I would love to see her back in a camp. Bethune, I thought it was fabulous. She got minutes. I think that she's a very deserving member of this team. Shaw didn't play much, or actually didn't play at all. Didn't have her really available due to fitness in this. So it's not so much the attacking midfield. I think Lavelle did very well for where she's at kind of in her career. And I think that her successors are quite obvious. But then larger philosophical question is, who is the next U.S. Women's National Team number 8? And does the U.S. want to play with one? And I think that
Yeah,
that's like the big thing, right? Is either they have a successor to that, but they're going to have to adjust their style to cater to it, or it's going to be a system thing where they play with closer to the 2-10 system, or more of that not the box, but sort of more of a box out of possession, so that they can be very attacking with the ball and then make it more of a spacing issue rather than a connective issue off of it, you know?
Yeah, because if you think about Sam Coffey and Lindsey Horan, they are both midfielders who kind of need somebody else to do the running for them so they can
Right.
do their thing, which is really crazy when you think about the fact that that Portland midfield functioned at all with them both in it. I mean, I think maybe the credit goes back to just kind of a left field name here, but Rocky Rodriguez just like
Yeah. Well,
ran like a marathon every game.
Horan predated Coffee, I think, and I also think that Horan, not for nothing, and this is I say this with like a lot of empathy to Lindsey Horan. I just don't think whatever sort of limiting thing she's had with her knee over the last couple of years, I just don't think she's as mobile as she was when she was in Portland.
Yeah, no, she's not the same player. And you're right. That's my mistake that Coffee kind of came on a bit later. So
But they played in a
interesting to
4. They
see.
played in like a 4, more of a diamond. They did that because of Coffee. Like, it's true, and Rocky Rodriguez was a huge part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's how do you solve that problem? Obviously, I know a lot of people when they look at Lily Johannes, they see Sam Mewis,
Mhm.
which obviously solves a whole bunch of problems in terms of passing range, in terms of ability to get around the field. So I think it's, she has that one performance in that pre-tournament friendly where it's like, there it is. So hopefully we see Lily Johannes again at Wembley Stadium later this fall when the U.S. goes and takes on England. They've got a couple friendlies against Iceland before that too,
Yep.
which who knows what that's going to look like. Maybe that's more of a domestic pool. Maybe that's an opportunity to just do a victory tour. Who knows exactly what that roster is going to look like? But
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely packing that they're doing 3 games in that international break. So I do think that's going to probably be the CBA mandated, because you're only allowed to do a victory tour in one international window now. So I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't that. And then I think the other I didn't mention, I think Corbin Albert is also kind of interesting, which is that you saw what she can do with a little bit of time on the ball. She looked real green to the pace of international play. That was like my biggest criticism. And maybe that's a player that you stick with to see if she can speed up, but also again, with some of the other players you have available, I think that you have to always be careful. This is something that Vlatko also fell to. You have to be careful with your projects. You can't hold on to a project too long, lest you just get into this sunk cost fallacy of trying to make something work when it's only halfway there.
Right, because Albert's role primarily was to just be the legs, the legs for Horan and Coffey. We saw that in the final. And then, again, occasionally she can play that pass, and that's a nice bonus. But you mentioned earlier, what's the trade-off? If you bring in a player like Albert, whose main role is be a bit of a destroyer and just cover ground so that other people can then do interesting things on the ball, where does that leave you limited elsewhere? So I think that's kind of the thing to wait and see. It also isn't particularly helpful for her to grow in that role that her club situation is on a team that has the ball 95% of the time and is playing extremely high up the field constantly. Doesn't really ask a lot of her.
It's tough.
It's
tough when these midfielders come from France and they're used to having a lot of time to place their passes. It does impact things in terms of pace of play.
Yeah, whereas, obviously Horan's done the NWSL thing, but Albert kind of feels like a player who could benefit from coming back home and being in a bit of a more physical league environment. Before we take another break, we can obviously continue to talk about her after the break. We do have to get into Emma Hayes, who comes in with so little prep. She basically did this tournament with 14 players. We joked, only an 18-player roster. That's not very much. And then the U.S. didn't use their 18 players anyhow. How much do we think fans can get their hopes up based on what we saw here, that with no time basically and not really trying much that was new, the switch to Emma Hayes was enough to get the U.S. a gold medal?
I think people should be very excited about that. I mean, I think there was a lot of big existential questions that were necessary and led to Hayes, right? Last year, like, you don't want to say that those questions were wrong because they led to the hiring of Hayes, but I think this fear that there are no creative American players is off. I think the fear that the defense, that you have to like overcoach to make the defense work was off. You just have to pick the right players and trust them. So I think that in terms of the health of the player pool for the next, I would say 4 years, which I think they really just have to think cycle by cycle, you feel great. And then you also trust that Hayes correctly identifies what makes the team good, which is, in my opinion, 75% of the battle of an international manager.
It is very funny, though, that she said that thing about the US not having other creative players besides Rose, then backtracked that when she was like, you have all these people. And then she kind of won the tournament without them because Lavelle was hurt and Shaw was hurt, and she doesn't really know Croy Bethune. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how does she get all those creative players into a team. We'll talk more about that, more about the Olympics, and a bit about the Red Stars after another quick break. CHGO Red Stars is also brought to you by Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary, your home for judgment-free cannabis shopping. All kinds of visitors, whether you're experienced or new, are welcome to come explore, discover, and purchase a wide array of their quality products. Sunnyside has everything you need to elevate your summer. They're a one-stop shop. They've got an expertly curated menu with over 100 strains to choose from, and the experience is super easy, from ordering online to picking up in store with the help of their friendly staff who are always there to answer your questions. Sunnyside is Illinois' favorite dispensary, with locations in the city, including in Wrigleyville and River North, and beyond, out in the suburbs and across Illinois as well. If you're a new customer just starting out, Sunnyside has expert guidance and brands they know you'll love, like Good News and Mindy's. Or if you're a pro, they've got you covered with that wide selection of over 100 strains, new ones being added every week, and they know you'll love Cresco and Florical's incredible quality and the consistency of the products you get at Sunnyside. Again, it's so easy to order online. They're there to help in store. They've got so many good deals available going on this summer right now, whether you're out at a music festival, spending time out in this beautiful weather near the lakefront, out on the golf course. We've got a CHGO event to tell you about here in a second that fits that. So much that Sunnyside has to offer. And if you visit them right now, for Bright Buys every day, you can get over 50% off your first 3 online purchases when you use code HICHGO. That's HICHGO at checkout. Exclusions apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary. Bright Buys every day, only for 21 and over, or Illinois medical card holders. Meanwhile, so much going on here at CHGO, particularly on the events side of things. Bears, lots of stuff going on as the preseason is underway. If you weren't able to make the London trip they're organizing, there's another trip going on out to Phoenix, Arizona. So the Bears are going to take on the Cardinals. That's on November 3rd. Huge package there. Again, early access and discounts as always available to diehards. Still got White Sox and Cubs events to go with the rest of the season. Obviously, the mood in those teams slightly different. Remember, there's always the Friday 120 Club at the Cubs games as well. Mentioned the golf tournament. CHGO is having our second annual kickoff classic. That's at Cog Hill course number 2 and is presented by Circa Sports Illinois. So go to the events page to check out that. There are not that many spots left for that. Those are going very, very quickly. And then, of course, got to tell you about the first ever CHGO Fire Takeover. That's happening at the Fire against Inter Miami game. That is on August 31st. Hopefully, Messi actually in attendance this year. Either way, you should be in attendance. We've got a block of seats. Again, discounts available for diehard members. We're going to be doing a tailgate at the stadium beforehand. Details on that to come. Festivities will be starting around 5:30. There's also a Jason Derulo concert after this game that the Fire have thrown in. But Messi, Suarez, Busquets, Jordi Alba, and co. all coming in to take on the Fire. And from a Fire perspective, hopefully it's another dominant performance for the home team. For all of this, you could go to you could go to allchgo.com/events. All right, Claire, before we get out of here, a few other things. I want to first touch on just a couple other notes from the tournament itself. It's been interesting to see a couple people forget about Naomi Girma because Ann-Katrin Berger has been getting some online buzz as the best player at this tournament. Took a very good Sophia Smith goal to beat her in that semifinal. As a Chelsea fan, I'm feeling like they really gave up on her too soon because she's been excellent for Gotham, was excellent for Germany in this tournament, and I think is deservingly getting lots of flowers as, if I was to pick a non-US player who really stood out.
Yeah, it would have been somewhat poetic, right? To have AKB kind of get that revenge against Emma Hayes a little bit, right? But yeah, Sophia Smith kind of squashed that. But I was like, oh, there's something there. There's something there. But yeah, I think Ann-Katrin Berger's been wonderful. Obviously, we've seen how well she's played for Gotham since joining that team, and bringing Jess Carter over as well. I think that they're loading up still. That's going to be a scary team come playoff time. Yeah, I mean, I think this whole tournament has kind of felt like players. Well, maybe the best way to put this is that the U.S. is a very good tournament team, and they understand the Olympics very well. And I think the other global team that does that is Germany. Germany understands the Olympics. They medal at the Olympics. That's what they do. And I think Ann-Katrin Berger kind of personified that. And you saw them battle through so much injury adversity. And this was the final tournament for their interim manager. And just I was very impressed by how Germany, despite the 2 losses to the United States, just understand what it takes to kind of get on that podium. And I think that if you look at that penalty save at the end of the bronze medal match, I mean, that's that, right? That's just sort of that German spirit of how they make it onto the podium every single year.
And of course, in that game, they beat Spain. I'm not really sure what to make of the Spanish, because it's this very odd thing where post-scandal in the wake of all of that, they get a bunch of influx of players back in, particularly from Barcelona. And it feels like they are still trying to figure out how to fit like 20 players onto the field at the same time. And it's both, they don't seem to know what they want to do internationally, but to your point, they also don't seem to know how to translate that 90% possession thing that so many of their players are used to at club level to the international game, when not only are the other teams going to defend against you, their individual talent is just as good as well. And they're defending kind of as a tactical decision more than a, we're terrified for our lives and we can't hang decision.
Yeah, they struggled with how vertical Colombia and then Brazil played. I mean, that's kind of obviously I think also the own goal in the semifinal just like really rocked them mentally after kind of barely escaping against Colombia. I think my 2 main things with Spain is that I think that their defense has always been susceptible to very vertical play. This was even true in the World Cup last year. I think they got a little bit not lucky, because they're a very good team. They won that tournament on talent, but they got to play European competition, I guess, in the later knockout stages. And so they kind of got the games that they wanted. And I also think that even though the really toxic coaches are gone, I don't think they made a particularly ambitious hire with who they have right now. They elevated an assistant. And so I think it's a little bit of a mix of, they have some things that are exploitable by certain kinds of play. And also, I just don't think that it was particularly inspiring from the tactical side in this particular tournament. It's also their first Olympics, which, like, the Olympics are hard and they're kind of special and different, and you get smacked in the face sometimes in the Olympics. The U.S. knows it better than anybody,
Right. Yeah. The Olympics is not a tournament for pretty football. It just really isn't. And to your point, the U.S. knows that. Germany knows that. Spain will have to figure it out. Any other quick closing Olympic thoughts other than we had Canada and all their drama, which feels like it was months ago at this point, and that was three weeks ago. They're in a weird spot. Overall, not a particularly memorable tournament from a soccer perspective. I think obviously the story is going to be right. The U.S. potentially returning to the pinnacle after a few years wandering around in the wilderness.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of nations in transition, which makes sense now that the Olympics are over, right? The Olympics are kind of tricky in that maybe do you run it back from the World Cup? Do you completely refresh it like the US did from the World Cup? I think that, Australia and Canada kind of did the let's run it back approach, so did Spain. Now they're kind of moving into this period of like, okay, well, Spain doesn't. The European teams have to go right into the Euros, God bless. But like, Canada, Japan, Australia, I think all of those teams now have a second to kind of take a deep breath and figure out where they're going. I'm worried about Canada. I mean, we've seen the Canada soccer struggles, even just from a budget standpoint. The players had to almost strike last year before the World Cup. Now they have the drone scandal. They almost certainly will not have the same coach going forward. I feel for Canada. I think their players are really good, and I feel bad that they did not get the NWSL bump that everybody else got in this tournament. It doesn't feel fair, but yeah, I just think now it is just like, ooh, now like the really soccer nerd stuff begins, because the winning part is over, or the failure part to win, and now we get into like where people are going to start tinkering, and I think that that's where things get interesting as well.
Well, especially for Canada, who are now fully going to be going into the post Christine Sinclair era that they kind of very slowly backed their way out of in a way. And, we'll see what that next generation looks like. Speaking of which, we got to talk about briefly, I think, what the Red Stars have been up to recently. We've got just briefly, I want to get your thoughts on their 2 new signings. I guess I'll start there with Julia Grosso. weird tournament for her. Unused sub in their first 2 games, then started and went 74 minutes in the must-win against Colombia, and then got subbed on ostensibly to take a PK and didn't take one in their loss against Germany. But I wouldn't say Red Stars fans should be at all discouraged by that, right?
No, Grosso's usage for the Canada women's national team has always been weird, even going back to Tokyo. I would not overthink it. I think that obviously also their coaching staff was thrown into complete disarray in this tournament. So, no, I think very highly of Julia Grosso. I think she is also, even if she's not the kind of player that the Red Stars are going to, what's the right way to put this? I think she's going to adapt to NWSL play well, but it's going to take a second. It's very different than where she's been playing for club, but she's so technical on the ball. And she has, I think anyone who has watched the Red Stars, they run and they run and they run and they get numbers forward and no one can find Mallory Swanson, right? Here is your person who's going to find Mallory Swanson like to her feet where she wants it. And so that's very exciting, I think, for Chicago fans.
Yeah, and I mentioned this on our last show. It does feel like she's kind of the weird replacement for what Shea Groom was supposed to be and simply hasn't been. Now, we got one 90-minute Shea Groom performance at the end of the Summer Cup. Looked great. Again, very small sample size, but obviously that's a bonus too if she can be some sort of contributor down the stretch. Also in the Red Stars signing news, a player that the world, if you weren't aware of her going into that Olympic gold medal final, you are now familiar with Ludmila, who absolutely should have scored in the second minute of this game, put 1-on-1 against Naeher. She also had that just bullet of a shot that went in, but was offside. Maybe that's a nice advertisement. Well, maybe nice isn't the right word. Maybe that's the two sides of the coin of an advertisement of what Red Stars fans can look forward to. At the very least, she's going to be a player who defenders have to think about, so they have to take some of their attention away from Mal Swanson.
Yeah, Ludmila is going to be ready for the style of play immediately. You saw that in that gold medal game. She's going to pull space away from Swanson, and I think people should really see her as a huge benefit to the attack in tandem with Swanson. I think if she had been brought in to be the oh my God, sole focal point of the attack, I think that would have been. I think, like you said, she looks so good on the ball. She can really make defenders miss. I think the biggest thing is just the final ball and the final piece of production. But with Swanson, I think that is what fans should be excited for. And I do think Chicago maybe overpaid a little bit, but I also think they're in the position to do so right now. So why not?
Yeah, the Red Stars outside of Swanson, who's making, league record money, aren't exactly shelling out a whole lot of cash right now on that roster. I do want to get your thoughts also briefly on kind of the place that team's roster finds itself in. Ludmila and Grosso are going to help with the ball. They're going to help going forward. Big questions, though, defensively now. That defense is really thin. Staub's out for the season. Maxi Rawl is out for some unknown period of time. We've seen Kerry Recaro play center back. Not sure really how I feel about that. Leilani Nesbitt looked pretty good, actually, as a right back. And Donaldson had her kind of underlapping in a midfield in possession. So I think I like that a lot. But I think the question is, are the Red Stars going to be better enough in the attack to compensate for the Sam Staub-sized hole in the defense?
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question, right? I'm so bummed about Sam Staub. It's so frustrating that this happened in the Summer Cup. It's so frustrating as this happened when they had just kind of with these signings realigned the balance of all three lines. They were going to be positioned to make a really nice push to the postseason. But this is, you can't overstate it. This is brutal. This is a brutal miss for them. And so they do have to hope that the biggest issue for Chicago over the last 2 years, and even with how well they've played at times this year, is that the midfield can't hold the ball, meaning that the defense has to do a lot of the work. Now, they're probably hopeful that they can hold the ball better. I don't think Kerry Recaro is the answer, probably in the defense or the midfield. I like Recaro a lot if you need to fill numbers in the midfield, but I don't think she's a focal point player. I like Leilani Nesbitt a lot, actually, and she is someone who literally has been working into her fitness. I think probably the Summer Cup break has been really good for her, just kind of probably grinding with conditioning to get into that position to be able to make an impact for a full 90. But I do think the answer lies in kind of what Grosso can do in that midfield and connect with players, and if Nesbitt can become a little bit more of that wrecking ball that she's kind of looks like she can be on her best day. But yeah, I don't know what they do. I don't know if they change the formation. They favor the 4-back, and I like that. But the numbers back there are thin, so I'm curious what happens there.
Yeah, I've been asking all season for a Nesbitt, Julie Bianchi double pivot.
I think that would be great. See, you got the ball player, and you got the defensive mid, right? It's like,
I don't know why we haven't seen it.
Yeah.
It's been odd. It's been weird, especially because, to your point, Bianchi is like the only player pre-Grosso in that midfield who's got any ball progression really going on there. So we'll have to see. A brief note on the Red Stars' upcoming schedule. They have 2 games on the road coming off this break. They're at Louisville on the 24th. They are then at Angel City on September 1st. But then September 8th, this should be a party. Welcome back match, the gold medal celebration match of Swanson and Naeher. And it is against maybe the most dangerous attack in NWSL. But again, Kansas City would have something to say about this. But Orlando Pride, September 8th, Barbara Banda, Marta, etc. coming into SeatGeek Stadium. So that should be a fun one. Hopefully that's got a good crowd. I assume the Red Stars are going to market the hell out of it between now and then, because, you know, as if Naeher and Swanson weren't marketable already, gold medals help, and 9 million people watched that game on big NBC over the weekend, which, what a crazy weekend for ratings. 9 million for the women's soccer final, and then later that day a peak of 22.
That was nuts.
I think, for the men's basketball final.
I went to Gracie O'Malley's in Wicker Park to watch that, and it was packed. It was really fun. It was like, got the work done in the morning, and then went to go have some fun. Right. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Steph Curry. America salutes you. That is going to do it for this episode of CHGO Red Stars. We packed a lot in here, but there was a lot to pack in. Claire, thank you so much for taking the time. Where can people find what else you are up to these days?
Yeah, you can find all my stuff at Just Women's Sports. We've been going really hard in the paint on video content throughout the Olympics, and that's going to continue post-Olympics. So if you want to subscribe to the Just Women's Sports YouTube channel, you can find a lot of my stuff there. Subscribe to the Just Women's Sports newsletter. We got women's sports news in your inbox 5 days a week. You can find me on social media at Scout Ripley. I'm trying to build up my personal TikTok, so if anyone wants to go follow me on TikTok, that's what we're doing. That's the project for this month. So if anyone wants to do that, that'd be great. But yeah, just kind of follow along. We got a lot going on for the rest of the calendar year, so stoked for all that.
Awesome. Well, definitely, I would guess a lot of our listeners are already following all of that. If they are not, they should be. So go support what Claire is up to. That is going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening to this show. As always, I am Alex Campbell, and I'll see you next time.
We all silly like the mayor.